I hope I got this right. Ramon Del Villar? Del Villar?
Ramon Del Villar. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So from like I said, from what I read on your email, attorney by day, writer by night, is that kind of your is that your deal? Like attorney by day and you're writing books and trying to become a best-selling author and world domination and all that other wonderful fun stuff?
Well, not really best-selling out, at least not yet.
Yeah, not
Hopefully,
yet.
I will one day be, but right now, I'm just an aspiring writer. I would call myself.
See, so I have a theory, and we're going to say this is a good spot. See, I don't believe in aspiring writers. What I believe is that everybody is a writer, right? And you have a story you believe worth sharing. Now you have goals. Goals are good.
That is true.
You know,
that is true. You know, it's funny. I'm an attorney by profession, attorney at law, but and I write, of course, about an attorney, Mexican American attorney who is who I would like to be, not who I am, but necessarily, but who I would like to be. And he's a great attorney, criminal defense attorney, and he in my first book, Payback, he represents the grandson of a banker, very prominent in Mexico, who's caught at the airport in Houston with a load of cocaine in his bags. And of course, the Roberto Duran, who's my hero, the attorney, investigates the case and discovers that actually he is innocent, because I must say, unfortunately, that 99% of the defendants in a criminal case are guilty, actually. It's very seldom that you have really an innocent defendant. In this case, particularly in my novel, it is innocent because it was a trap set by an individual, a drug lord from Mexico, who tried to revenge, tried to, that's why it's called payback, because he assumes, the drug lord in Mexico assumes that his daughter was killed by the individual, by the grandson of the banker. And it happens that the investigation goes all the way, and Roberto Duran, my character, represents the grandson in the trial. One of the things I always wanted to be, and if I'm thinking too much, just tell me and I'll stop.
No. Go right ahead, my friend.
Okay. One of the things that always bothered me a little bit about reading a novel, a legal thriller, as they call them, and about movies or TV series, and by the way, Law and Order is an exception because it's very well done. But there are many instances in which what happens in a novel, or what happens in a book, or in a TV series cannot actually happen in a courtroom. So, since I was, and I must say that more than an attorney, I have worked in the courts as an interpreter, a Spanish English interpreter, and that's why you notice that I have a thick accent in Spanish, in English. But the point is that since I've worked in maybe 600 trials in my 25 years that I worked for the court, I found out all the rules of the courtroom. And my novel is written in such a way that everything that happens in the courtroom in my novel can actually happen in the courtroom. And I took pains, even to the point of sending my book to some of the federal judges here, asking them to critique me if I was doing something that was incorrect in my books.
So we're gonna come back to this because it's interesting. But I have a theory about you already. About 5 minutes into the podcast, I have a theory about you. Let's see if I get you right. You value integrity. You value integrity, and you're very passionate about your day job. Like you're very passionate about. Yeah, right.
I love it. Yes, I love it.
Yeah. So, and I say it like this, because usually, okay, not just if you're a lawyer, you're a cop, you're military, you're a fireman, you're a nurse.
Yeah.
one thing all of you have in common is you all want to serve. Whatever, like that is your common denominator. That entire occupation. Now, how you do it's a little differently, but essentially the idea is you want to make the world a better place than what you walk into. That am I getting you right here?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's one of the purposes in my life has been always try to improve the quality of people, and to some extent, one of the beautiful things about being an attorney is that you're the voice for the defenseless, for the people who cannot speak for themselves, and particularly in my profession, since I'm an English speaker and a Spanish speaker, I can communicate those actual situations and actual feelings. No? I'm going to tell you a little anecdote that's kind of funny, and I'm going to have to use a little bit of Spanish here, but
that's okay.
Yeah.
Just teach me a really good naughty Spanish swear word when it's over. We'll be great. Right,
Okay.
go ahead. Go do what you gotta do.
We were in a sentencing procedure, and one of the things that the judge tells before imposing sentence, the judge asks the defendant, "Okay, is there anything that you want to tell me?" And of course, they say all kinds of things. Your Honor, I didn't know that it was so bad, and this and that. But this guy in Spanish said, "Se me hizo fácil," which literally translated means I thought it was easy. Okay? But my point is, it's not that he's saying, because if you say to an English speaker, I thought it was easy, that's being cynical. No?
Yes.
That's making the impression, well, I thought I was going to be able to get away with it. And that's not what he meant. What he meant was, I didn't think it was such a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I translated. That's what I interpreted. I said, well, I didn't think it was such a big deal. And the judge, who, by the way, is a judge I love very much. I'm not going to say the name. It's a great judge, probably the best federal judge in the world, in the United States at least. But he said, well, actually, he speaks Spanish. He's a Spanish speaker too. So he said, well, actually, Mr. Del Villar, yet I thought it was easy. and you don't argue with the federal judge in the courtroom, particularly if you're the interpreter. No?
Yeah.
So I told him, yes, Your Honor. That's what he said, period. But then afterwards, drinking a cup of coffee in the cafeteria of the courtroom, of the courthouse, I told him, Judge, the point is, you're a Spanish speaker, so you understand the meaning of se me hizo fácil. I thought it was easy. But he was not being cynical. He was telling you, well, I didn't think it was so bad. I didn't think it was such a big deal, such a, and he accepted, by the way. He said that you're right, you're absolutely right. That's true. And that's one of the beautiful things about an interpreter. And by the way, I want to tell you a little bit about the interpreting profession, because it's very little known. But what you're doing is you're not translating the words, you're not interpreting the words, you're interpreting the meaning of the words. Okay. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I am a federally certified court interpreter and an attorney at law. By the way, I don't know if you can see my diploma. The one there you can see it's from the court interpreter. Okay. And
yep.
And this one is the one that I see in my screen behind me is the Supreme Court of Texas, which is my license as an attorney. But anyway, the federal certified court interpreters are about 1,000 in all the United States, and it's an examination that has been taken by about 25,000 candidates, of which only about 1,000 have finally passed the two sets of exams. One's a written exam, and then it's an oral exam. And that is 4% passing rate, and it's very, very small, but that shows the intensity and the need for being precisely what you're expected to be. So I love my profession, as you said, and I think that I speak and I give voice to those who do not have a voice.
Well, I think one of the things I want to just touch here is languages are different. Like you say, words in languages aren't necessarily it's the idea behind the words, right? Okay. Every culture is different. Even okay, like Spanish. Mm-hmm. How like that? I'm assuming a lot of people you deal with are from Mexico. Right. I'm maybe I'm wrong with that assumption, but let's say
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true.
right. But let's say you were dealing with somebody from Trinidad or Tobago, which is probably not, you probably have from time to time. They might say the exact same words, but may have a completely different meaning because of where they live. It's like you and I. Like, okay, I'm in Canada.
Uh-huh.
You're in Texas.
Yes.
Now, some things we'll get no problem, but there are some
Uh,
things about Texas I
yeah,
won't have a clue about. Like, I just won't. Like, I won't have a clue
that's
because
true.
I've never lived in Texas.
That's true.
But right, but there are things about here in Alberta. You're gonna look at me and go like, huh? Like, but because every place, and this is something that needs to be emphasized here, every place has its own culture, story,
Absolutely.
and idea. And
Yes.
an interpreter more than even knowing the words, because hablo español poquito. I can order a beer, maybe
Uh-huh.
like say how are you, and every once in a while, like when I like je parle français comme ci comme ça. So
Uh,
what happens with me, because French and Spanish aren't that different, I'll
yes.
sometimes start one and I'll go into the other without even realizing it. It's like, no, right? I'm sure that's happened to you. I don't know how many languages you can speak, but if you do speak multiple languages, it happens to us all.
Yes.
But the
Yes.
thing, but the thing is, right? And I think this has to be emphasized here. And by the way, kudos to you for your accomplishment. Like 1 in 25, that's a real that's a tough bar. But one of the biggest reasons is because of what I just said. It's not really about the understanding of the words. It's being able to look at somebody and understand exactly what they're saying, where they're coming from. Because yeah, I thought it was easy. Yeah, that sounds really cynical,
Yeah.
right? But you're saying I thought it was no big deal. It's a little different. The
Yes.
judge now is like, okay, now he's not gonna say what a cynical prick. He's like, he might even have a little bit of a chuckle now, right? Because guys still might be guilty, but you might understand. It's like you might understand where he's coming from, and that humanity might will make it so okay. The
Absolutely.
cynical guy might get like 10. We're just being hypothetical here. I don't need to tell me the details.
Yeah.
He might have gotten 5 years for
Yeah.
if he was a cynical prick. But I thought it was no big deal. He might just get a year
Yeah.
because you're like, okay, you still did something wrong, but I get where you're coming from too. And that's a very big part of the legal process as well, is understanding where everybody's coming from.
Exactly. Exactly. By the way, now that I learned that you speak French, I'm going to say something ridiculous, and you're going to laugh. I hope you laugh. Because I say, je parle français pratiquement comme l'espagnol. Solamente change la pronunciación para que suene como francés. Which basically I'm speaking Spanish, but saying that I speak Spanish with a
Yeah, I got it. No, I totally got it. It's like I speak French with a Spanish accent, or I speak French. Yeah, no, I totally got that.
And it's funny because French and Spanish, being both Romance languages, are really very similar, but have great differences. No? And I remember instantly what I was in France, and I wanted to buy, I think, some flowers for my wife or something. We were just traveling as tourists, and I went into a store, and I couldn't find the word for buying, and I think it's acheter, no? Or something.
It depends on what you're buying, right? Some things are acheté, and there's another word for it too. There is another word for it depending on what you buy. But yes, yeah.
Yeah. But the only thing I could I could find was in Spanish to buy is comprar. No? So I was je décidé de comprer. Je ne comprenais pas.
Yeah, I know. I got you. No, totally. Right?
And that is the temptation of languages sometimes. No? And it's even worse with Italian, by the way.
Oh yes.
Italian is even more similar to Spanish than French, of course, and but it's so different sometimes that you make a big mess.
So my family's Maltese.
Yeah,
So the Maltese language swears in Arabic, speaks like Italian, and has just a touch of French in it, right?
yeah,
So
exactly.
Now, because of my fact, I know a little bit of Maltese, not a lot, but a very, very little bit. I can swear in like 3 different Arabic languages because the curses are
Uh,
very, the curses are very Arabic.
Yeah.
But again, some of when you speak Maltese, an Italian will understand at least the gist of what you're saying, right? And a French and there's a little French, like French in our history too, and we've been conquered by everybody, but there's a little French in our history too. So there's a little bit of all 3 of those languages in there, and it's again, it's like I said earlier, some of the same words are the same in every language, and that is so fascinating.
Yeah.
But sometimes, even though it's the same word, it means entirely different things depending on where you are, and it's
it may have a totally different meaning for some people, no?
Yeah, exactly, right. And that I think it's one of the most fascinating things about human beings. I think it illustrates the human condition in a really cool way, because it's like you and I aren't that different, but we're also vastly different at the same time.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes, that's true.
Right. Yeah. So it's like, and language is probably the best teacher of this, of anything I've ever seen, because it's like, again, I can talk to you a little bit in Spanish. Like I would say a little bit in Spanish, and right. I can talk to you more in French, but and you'll get that to some degree. But again, your Spanish and my Spanish, very, very different. Right? You have a deeper, richer. I'm going to ask this just as an aside. Are you born in Texas, or were you born across? Like, you have a very strong Spanish accent. That's why I'm asking this question. Were you born like across the border in Mexico?
Yeah,
or were you?
I was born in Mexico City, as a matter of fact.
Oh, okay,
Mexico
yeah,
City, the capital. Yeah, and
yeah.
but I grew up speaking English, and the funny part of that is that I didn't know that I spoke English, because my mother spoke to me in English all the time, but I would always respond in Spanish. And the first time I came to the United States, it was funny. I was 14 years old, and I came with my father, who was a medical doctor, to visit another medical doctor here, an army doctor in the United States, in Oklahoma City. And according to me, I didn't speak English. No? I understood everything that was being said, but I didn't speak English. So if we went to a store, I would ask him, I like that in Spanish, I would tell him, I like that shirt. Would you buy it for me? He said, why don't you ask for it? Because I don't know how to. But the funny thing is that the part of the story that it's interesting, that we were invited by a individual station. I'm talking about the 1950 something. I'm 79 years old, so we're talking about a long time ago, when the TV was in black and white, mostly. In Mexico, that was called black and white. And in Oklahoma, they had a station that had developed color TV. And we were invited to the house of the gentleman who owned the station. And we were talking there, and I was falling asleep because all the older people in the table were talking, and I just hear. And my father at some point said, well, I think we're going to call it night, because my son is falling asleep. And the owner of the house said, wait, why don't we send Billy, my son, to take him to the Billboard Hotel where you were staying? And you can stay here. And my father said, okay, would you like that? Yes. I said, fine. And so we went downstairs to the garage, and Billy came. I was 14 or 15 years old. He was about 17. And we walked into the garage, and I saw a Chevrolet 57 or 55, I think it was. It was the first that had the windshield, the enveloping windshield. And I say, immediately I saw the car and said, where did you get this car? In English. I said, well, in the dealership. How could you get it? Because it was October, and in Mexico, they started selling those cars until March of the following year. So I had never seen one on the flesh, let's say. And I said, how could you get it? It's in the dealership. Well, so anyway, we got into the car, we started talking, and at some point he says, I didn't speak English. And I said, no, I don't. I said, "Well, you speak English." Well, that's true. And
No, it's,
yeah, the funny part was, okay, when I got to a topic that was interesting to me, and I'm a car lover, by the way, I started speaking English because I did know how to speak, but I was aware of the fact that I was able to speak. And probably it's also the fact that I am aware I have an accent, and it's kind of embarrassing sometimes. No? And I say, well, I don't like to say it in Spanish. I'd rather say it I don't like saying it in English. I'd rather say it in Spanish because I speak Spanish perfectly.
well, I first off, just on a personal note, I hope that's not true anymore because you speak very, very eloquent English, like honestly. And but the second point is, uh, I can kind of understand that because for you, this was normal. And like I said, maybe you had your own little like insecurities about speaking the language, but your mom spoke English all the time.
Yeah,
You'd pick up on it,
yeah,
right? You just would. It's part of the deal. And if you're and if your dad, I'm assuming like you grew up mostly people around people speaking Spanish,
yes,
so yeah, so you're around both of them like it was no big deal to you, and because it was just your normal.
no,
So but but it also might have been also the fact too, and maybe this is just a guess from the outside looking in, is you were still in primarily a Spanish community, so
yeah,
maybe English was a novelty at the
yeah,
time.
yes, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
true. Yeah, true.
maybe, yeah.
But it's interesting, I've read there were studies during the time of the British Empire. The officers of England, of the United Kingdom, went to serve in India, and they had small children, and they would come back to England, and the children, of course, grew up, and at the time they grew up, they went to India to serve in India as officers of the British Army, and they got there, and in 2 or 3 days they were speaking Hindi
Mhm.
because they actually had heard it and had lived without being really aware of the fact that they were able to speak it. But once you were immersed in the culture and the language, you have to speak it, and you speak it.
Yeah.
So it's funny. That's the way we learn, actually, by hearing. Huh?
We hear, we learn, we try. Like I always say this when I learn a new language, I first learn the dirty swear words. Number one,
Yeah,
because everybody that speaks a different language, now it's a chance for them to have fun. And the
yeah,
thing is, what happens there is you form a bond with that person who teaches you,
yeah,
and you make a friend, and you make
yeah.
a friend. And once you do that, then you start learning some of the more sophisticated stuff. But you always start with stuff that's simple, stuff that's fun, stuff that's very like
Yeah.
common. And
Uh,
like I said, I think language teaches us more. We're more alike than we want to admit, and it's still vastly different. And one thing is, everybody swears, and I
mhm,
mean everybody swears.
yeah,
So it's just that, and it's also part of the culture too. You learn things about the culture. The other great way to break into a culture is their food.
yeah,
Because I mean, seriously, like I love the fact that in this day and age, I can try something from everybody, and
yes,
it's cool. Like, you know what
yeah,
I mean? It's super, super cool. And
yeah,
again, food is culture just as much as language is.
yeah. We live in such an interconnected world, really, that it's unbelievable. Uh, I told you I'm 79 years old, and I was driving in the car the other day with my wife, and we were looking for McDonald's because
Mhm.
she wanted some French fries, and we didn't know where in the area where we were where there was a McDonald's close by. So we just got on the phone and talked to the iPhone and said, "Where's the closest McDonald's?" And we were giving it to her, and we were realizing, my wife and I, we realized, it's unbelievable. When we were younger, that was not possible. You were in a car, and you had to stop and look for maybe a telephone booth or an information booth of some kind. And now you can do it from the car without even stopping. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable how the world has changed, really.
Well, here's this. Okay, you're in Texas. I'm in Canada. We're having a conversation. I told you some jokes. You've actually laughed. This would not have been possible. Like even 10 years ago, would not have been possible to do this,
Totally impossible.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. We live in like we really do live in a magical time. Like there, like now you've lived a very I again I wish you nothing but health, but you're coming to your twilight and you're still seeing that the world has changed probably as the time has come on faster and faster and faster, and you're
yeah,
probably like, holy shit, like what happened? Like because when you started it might have seemed simpler in
yeah.
some ways than it does now, and now you're like, I don't know. It's like I'm 40 and I feel like this. I can only imagine you. It's like I'm 40. It's like, wow, what happened in life? Like I'm that way, right? You know, it's like
Yeah.
you've seen. You're talking about the 50s. Like, okay, like you talk cars.
Yep.
I love 1950s cars. They're fan freaking tastic. Like they're awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
I hate I despise most cars from the 90s onward because I
Uh-huh.
think in comparison they're junk. I just do. Like to me
Yeah, yes. Some extent, yes, yes. Yeah,
yeah, because and this is going to be me talking to clouds. Shut up. But I mean, but back in the old days, cars were built to last, and they were. And I'm not going to say every car from those eras was great, but the great ones, I mean, they still work. Even now, they still
There's
work.
some are still rolling around. I was just looking the other day in the shop at a 53 Chevrolet. It's still running, and
Yeah,
it's still in good shape. Huh? It's unbelievable, really.
yeah. And whereas I look at a car now, I'm like, I don't like. Part of me doesn't want a car because why? I'm going to buy this piece of junk. It's probably going to disintegrate on me over time. You know, you ever see one of those cartoons where you're just driving down the street and then everything just disappears and you fall flat on the earth? I sometimes think that these cars today, that's what they're going to do. It's not the engines; they're not designed to last anymore, right? And it's one of the biggest changes of our era is when you were a kid, everything was built to last because everybody wanted something that was good and reasonable and didn't break.
Yeah,
Now, no one cares about that,
yeah.
right? Right. And again, it's an idea to change. I do think we're going to go back to what you did, I think sooner than later, right? But I mean, like that's like one of the biggest idea changes of the last 60 years,
Yeah.
right?
That's
Right.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm sure like when you started and where you're at now, you're like does it get easier? Or am I right in saying like you get more confused as you get older because you don't understand how the world works
You
anymore?
know, it becomes a little scarier to some
Yeah.
extent because there are so many things developing that constantly. One of the things that I would do a lot was translating, which, by the way, technically interpreting means when you're doing it orally. If you're
Mhm.
speaking to the judge, and translating is when you do it in writing. You know?
Mhm.
And I love to do translations. And when I translated before, I would have to have 3 or 4 dictionaries next to me to be able to check words. Okay, what exactly does this mean? Or to find a word that I couldn't find. Huh? But nowadays, I, I'm sitting at my computer. I just go to the internet and see how do you say this in Spanish or how do you say this in English, and it comes up with all kinds of explanations. So it's kind of scary, and at the same time, it's so fantastic uh, to see it's unbelievable. And now that we come to this, let me tell you a story because it's
Go,
funny,
go ahead.
ridiculous anecdote. But when I got certified, when I came to the United States, uh, took the FEL exam and I passed it the first time, which is very seldom, very few interpreters pass it. But anyway, I passed it, and of course, when I got my certificate as federally certified interpreter, I started looking for the court reporters to hire me. And the very first visit of a court reporter that I made, I lived in Brownsville, at the border with Mexico at that time, which is, by the way, it's a town in which most people speak Spanish and English because
Mhm.
they're so
Oh yeah.
close to Mexico. There's a lot of them. So I got to the court reporter, and she said, "Oh, by the way, we need an interpreter for tomorrow. Can you make it tomorrow?" Yeah, of course. That's great. Well, to make a long story short, I went to the deposition, and it was it's called a deposition, taking a statement on the oath with a court reporter. And the case was the attorney taking the deposition said, "Okay, Mr. So and so, we're here to take your deposition." And of course, I interpreted that. He said, "Yes, sir." And we're here because we had to continue your deposition last time about 4 months ago because you had to undergo surgery. Is that correct? And I interpreted, and the man said, "Yes, that's correct." And typical attorney, who cares what the surgery was for? But the attorney asked, "Okay, what was your surgery for?" And he said, "Me operaron del riñón," which is I was they operated me, or I had kidney surgery. Okay, but the problem is I could not remember for my life. I could not remember the word English for kidney, and I started thinking, going like this. I was about to say, "Well, they operated me on the organ that filters urine," because I couldn't think of the word. And then the brother of the deponent, who was sitting next to me, he turns to me and said, "Kidney." What? Oh, the kidney. I felt so embarrassed. I would rather have been in the jungles of Vietnam on the enemy fire than sitting in that.
Yeah.
But the funny thing was that after we finished, I apologized to the attorney and said, "I'm very embarrassed." "Oh, no, you did very well. As a matter of fact, you did better than the interpreter we had last time. So give me your card because I'm going to call you again." And he was my client later.
Yeah.
But it's funny, and that happens all the time. By the way, in the courtroom, it happens very often that you just forget and have a blank of the way.
Oh yeah.
And that's one of the problems with aging, is really that sometimes you have a blank about things that you know very well and just cannot remember. How do you say this? How do you do that? Yeah.
Well, yeah, because you're processing a lot of information when you're doing different languages too. It's a lot of information because you're again, it's about ideas more than words. It's about the ideas. So you're like,
Yeah.
I know this idea.
Yeah.
I got this idea.
Yeah.
And then you're like, I know it. It's like we talked about earlier, like that word for the other word for buy. I don't recall it. Now, partly I have not practiced. That's part of the other reason too. But there's a word for it, and you're like, and then it's like, oh shit, I know what this is. Come on. It's again, we all do it. We all have those like blank states, right? I mean, okay, I've done hundreds of hours doing this show. My mind has gone blank on the air tons of times. It happens. You're just, it's a normal. I look at, and this is how I look at it now. If I don't screw up at least a little bit, I'm done something wrong because it's rare, right? It's so rare. It goes so perfectly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true.
Yeah. But so I'm going to ask this because because I get the feeling that this is going to tie to your writing. Why did you want to become an attorney, or specifically an interpreter? Like, what was the reason behind that?
Say again, excuse me?
Can you ask, like, you wanted to be like, you've been an interpreter, and again, you're very accomplished, but I can hear your passion for it. So why did you want to do this? Like, what was the reason?
Well, actually, it was being hungry, Josh, because when we came to the United States, I would have to make a little bit of story, but my father was the owner of a pharmaceutical company in Mexico, and we sold it. And I wanted to come to the United States and live. And we came to the United States, and if I had lived as an American in the United States, I probably would not have to be working ever the rest of my life, because I had enough money for me to live comfortably and retire. I was 37 years old at the time. The funny part, and by the way, my wife, who's a financial wizard, told me, we have to invest this way. She planned it, everything planned. And if I had paid attention to her, I probably would have not needed to work. But unfortunately, I didn't pay attention to her. And I didn't live like an American in the United States. I hired people to do everything, my aunt, bring some.
Oh, God.
And a nanny for my children, and this and that. And of course, the problem was that in my plan, the money that I had invested, I put it in very leveraged investments in apartments. In other words, I paid 5% or 10% of down payment, and then with the rents I was going to pay, And in 15 years, according to me, I would have the money. And the problem was that Brownsville, it's at the border with Mexico, and it's populated by many, many, many people from Mexico. And in 1979 or 1980, I don't remember exactly, the Mexican government nationalized the banking industry of the country.
Oh, it
And
changed
the peso
everything.
went, the Mexican peso, which is the Mexican currency, went from being 23 to $1 to being 200 to $1. So of course, if my tenants in the apartment that I owned were paying me, let's say, $500 for rent, the following day they needed to pay $5,000 for them, because the price that went tenfold up. And of course, they defaulted. And by the way, I was an attorney in Mexico too. In Mexico, you can fight foreclosure for years, literally. I mean, if you want to keep a house, a mortgage, that's why it's so difficult to get a mortgage in Mexico sometimes, because you can fight it off and defend yourself for 2 years. No? So I assumed that the same was going to happen in the United States. And of course, my properties were foreclosed in about 3 months.
Mhm.
I gone. And then I ended up without the properties and, of course, without credit, because
Yeah,
everything was foreclosed. Yeah. They took away my car. I had a Lincoln Mark V, beautiful Givenchy, and they took it away. And the only thing we kept was my wife's Buick State wagon. And so at some point, I decided, well, I'm going to have to go back to Mexico and make a living in Mexico. But even in Mexico, it was hard to make it, because the situation was in turmoil, and the banking industry. Years later, it was sold back to the private sector, fortunately. But at that point, it was almost impossible to do something. And just by accident, to some extent, I discovered that I could make a living as an interpreter. Uh, it's a little story also, but I had to see my attorney, who was handling some of the last foreclosures and last things that of the situation that we had. And at some point, he said he spoke Spanish very well, like everybody all in Brazil. No? And he tells me, Ramon, you're an attorney in Mexico, and Mexican attorneys are crazy. Well, maybe, yeah, maybe I agree with you. But why do you say that? So, I just told the clients, told some attorneys that I'm working with in Mexico, that they had filed a lawsuit against our clients. It had been a bus accident in which some people from Corpus Christi had been killed in a bus transportation bus accident, and they were suing the company. And I just let them know that they have been a lawsuit filed against them, and they answered with a simple phrase and said, "Okay, we're very happy to hear that. Just keep us posted." And I said, "Well, maybe Ray, what happens is they didn't understand what you were saying. Maybe not everybody is bilingual in Mexico." I said, "No, I wrote them in Spanish." I said, "Really? Yeah. Okay, let me see his secretary had translated the letter." And well, the point was that the important thing is that the way it was translated, the words were translated, were verbatim, filing. But when you say filing in Mexico, it's been archiving, sent to the archives. So what they understood when they received the letter from the attorney in Brownsville was that the case had been settled, had been closed and sent to the archives. And they were very happy. So of course he said, "Oh, well, that must be the one." Yeah. And he said, "Okay, would you translate the letter for me?" Of course, sure. So I translated the letter, and I discovered that I could make it pretty good by translating. Then another client told me about the federal exam. I took it and I passed the exam, and started shortly thereafter started working the courts and all. So I could make a living, and at some point even I started working the federal court as a contract interpreter, and started making enough money to go to law school. And that's why I ended in Houston, by the way, because I was attending a law school in the Valley that they had opened, and they closed it because they were not able to get it accredited. So, but I had already finished 2 years, and I said, okay, well, I need to do something and go to law school in Houston. And we moved to Houston, and I got the job, the permanent staff position in the federal court here, and I was able to go to University of Houston and get my law degree in the United States, because you had to go all the way again for 4 years. It was a 4-year curriculum for me because of what. But that's how I started, because I couldn't make any other thing. I didn't know how to make it. Speak
No,
Spanish and English.
well, first off, more of the story here. First off, listen to your wife, ladies and gentlemen. Listen to your wife at the very beginning. You know, but I mean, kudos to you. It's you lost everything, and some
Yeah.
people would have given up. And
Yeah.
I'm sure there were moments you were like, "What the fuck did I do?" But at the same time, you were like, "Okay, now I'm going to reinvent myself," and you did. And to your credit, like to your vast credit, you became something else.
Yeah. You have no choice really sometimes, and I really thank God for. I'm a very blessed individual, honestly, and because everything I have accomplished really comes from the Lord. For me, you know? I really, everything has worked out for me great, and basically I'm not. Uh, I don't have the merit of that. It's just I've been blessed. You know? Blessed with good wife, good children, good profession now, and that's the truth.
Dude, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a good thing. Like like again today, I mean, for most of us, there's always something that's a little broken, right? Like you're right. I mean, I don't feel jealous or anything like that. I feel like, you know what? It sounds like somebody was watching out for you, and you know
Yes.
what? That's not a bad thing. You
Yeah.
know, it's not a bad thing, right? I mean, it gave you the opportunity to do what you needed to do in this life.
Yeah.
You did it,
Yeah.
and you know life's treated you good. You have good again. You have children you're proud of. I can tell you children you're proud of, right? You got a wife you love very very much, right? And you got a life that you're very very happy with,
Yeah.
and there's nothing wrong with any of that. And you're still pushing yourself, writing books now.
Yeah. Well, that's for fun. Let me tell you that I started writing because a boredom. Actually, I as a court interpreter, there's an institute in Arizona, in Tucson, Arizona, that prepares interpreters for the court. We call it the boot camp for court interpreters, because you go in without not knowing too much, and you come out the other end like a soldier, no? So it's a boot camp for court interpreters. So I was invited to be the professor of legal procedure because I was an attorney, and uh, but the problem was they had there for 3 weeks, sometimes 2 weeks, for most of the time 3 weeks, and I wasn't doing about 3 or 4 hours in the morning of the classes, and the rest of the time just didn't have anything. And one day I was sitting I had my first laptop computer, uh, not the ones that are all the cranky big things at that time, but I had them with me, and uh, I started thinking, well, what am I going to do? No? And I was bored, and I said, I'm going to write a book. I started writing it. And the funny part, Josh, is that my idea of payback was one. And once I started writing, to begin with, I wrote much. It was about 4 times the size of the novel. It was published later by English. But the point is, it started to some extent taking a life of its own. I
Mhm.
I had written in some way, and then I started kind of evolving and change it and change it and change it, and it was almost a different creature of what I had thought when I started writing. So that's one of the funny things about writing is you start and you really don't know exactly what you're going to write. You just have an idea. Okay, I want to say this, and you start saying it. It comes out sometimes different from what you were originally planned to write.
That's all art. All art's that way. I write, I draw, I make videos, I do all kinds of different. I have different skills,
Uh-huh.
and I have this idea in my head. It's like, this idea is awesome, and then when I go to put it on the page, right, or I put it on the screen,
Yeah.
it's like, nope. What I got and what came out, like that idea, they're not quite the same.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. That I think. But I also think, I mean, your day job gave you a lot of training, because the one thing about, again, going back to just something we said earlier about translating ideas.
Yeah.
That's not that different from writing a novel, honestly. You get an idea in your head and you translate it onto the page, whatever that looks like, right? And like you said, like every once in a while you look for that word for kidney and you can't find it, and that's okay too, right? Sometimes that leads to other discoveries. Like I've written 6 books, and every book has surprised me, because I had this idea and I'm like, and it goes here, and you're like, I didn't plan on this. Right. The only thing is I'm smart, because I realized that, you know what, sometimes it going in its own direction might be better than what I originally had in mind. And I'm smart enough to go and kind of just ride it out. Even this podcast, same thing, right? It was an accident that I started this. But again, I had this idea and life said, nope, that's not what we're doing. We're doing this. And it like, the act of doing things always takes a life on its own. The question that all of us have to ask is this: do you want to follow it through and see where it goes? Now, probably at first for you, it was boredom.
Yes.
But I if I were to make a wager now, it's fun.
It's a lot of fun. And you know the funniest part. And let me ask you one thing. I'm going to interview you now, George.
Okay.
Do you enjoy your books when you read them?
I actually do. I have so much fun with them.
But that's the funniest part. Now I read my books. My novel, I've read Payback about 5 times. I still enjoy it. It's ridiculous, but I like it. And now I'm working on my third novel, and sometimes I go back and start reading it, and of course I change a lot of things every time I read it. But the point is, I enjoy it. I'm having fun reading what I wrote, and sometimes I even reach a point and say, "How did I think of that?"
I think that's the best. I think that's the best part about it too, is because it's like you have this. Okay, I'm writing this story right now. My main character is an assassin. Was an assassin trying to become a good person, and her path to it is a code of honor, her own word. But she still thinks like an assassin. I mean, that hasn't changed, right? So every once in a while, so I wrote this scene yesterday. Previous chapter, younger her sitting and waiting, and because big part of an assassin job is sitting and waiting for whatever's supposed to happen. So in the new chapter, she's sitting and waiting again for different reasons. But here's the thing: she's older, so she's like, my quads never quite felt this way when I was younger, right? Because again, different waiting, different position, right? You find little things when you write that are just fun. And now, sometimes you will look back at your writing and you cringe just a little bit, because there are some things you're like, how did I do that? Right? Right? How did I do that? You do, right?
How did I do that?
But at the same, but it goes the other way too. Like once in a while, you'll read something you wrote, like, you know what? That was awesome. I don't know if I can take credit for it, but that was awesome. And it's like, all right.
It happens to me all the time. I say, how could I think of this?
Both ways, right?
Funny or whatever, but it's true. Yeah, it happens.
No, and that's really cool. I'm gonna say this because I think because something you mentioned earlier, something you mentioned at the very beginning, is
Uh,
you wanted it to feel like a real courtroom, and
yes,
and that's how I was able to actually figure out you take a lot of pride in what you do,
yes,
because you, my friend, are a stickler for details, which is again, it's perfect for someone in law because details are everything. Again,
hmm
your job again going for, like I've repeated this ad nauseum in this podcast, but it's the truth. The idea is when there's a misunderstanding, there is intention. You need to figure out intentions,
yes,
right? Impact.
yes. That's true.
That is undeniable. Like there's an impact here, and that
Oh,
mindset, and usually it's indisputable what the impact is.
mhm.
But where it's interesting is interpretation, because everybody has their own story,
Yes,
and you're right. A lot of times, yes, I was stupid enough to do this thing, Your Honor. Why did you do it? That's the interesting question.
that's an interesting part. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
That's the really interesting question,
yeah,
right? So when you're doing your stories, right? Because of someone like you has seen so many stories, like 600 cases, you've seen them,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
You've seen a lot of bullshit
Yes, yes,
sometimes, right? And every once in a while, you see genuine people in the system. Bad things have happened for whatever the reason is, right? And that's probably it's probably a bit of both, right? And I'm not saying they're innocent exactly, but I mean, you could put yourself in those shoes and you can see it.
oh yes,
And
absolutely.
absolutely, and you can totally see it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think so for you, I'm willing to bet this is a bet. I'm gambling. If I'm wrong, correct me. I'm willing to bet that for you because when you do see a legal drama, there's the drama of the impact or the event, and they have fun with the interpretation of why these things could happen. And
Yes,
sometimes it's very
yes,
interesting, but and you care about that.
yes.
But what you want is okay, but you can't get the full story without all the details,
Hmm.
right? And Law and
That's true.
Order and Law and Order, although they have a system really well nailed down, even they sometimes you look at what they're doing, it's like this is kind of stretching credibility just a touch. Like it can't be like right,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right. Because you watch like again, in all fairness to Law and Order, when you're doing that much television, it's going to happen. Like it's just the way it is.
You have to
But
do it.
right, but for you, right, you probably like this is just my guess is you take pride in your work.
Yeah. Mhm.
You've done a lot of, and I again we all know this. Like there's a trope that sometimes lawyers get a bad names, and I'm not saying sometimes you don't see a lot of bullshit because you do, right? But again, I feel this with you. There's a romantic there that really genuinely wants to serve and make its community better. And very often when you look at a legal drama, that doesn't always come out.
Yes, 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 that's true. You know, it's something. But the funny part really to me is that to some extent you think of writing something and it comes something different. No? At some point it gets life of its own to some extent, and it's something different than what you originally planned to write.
Oh, absolutely. But see, I think that's the best part because okay, here's what I realized. This is my big revelation.
Mm.
What every story has been told. What makes it your story special is you.
Yes.
Again, I don't see the world like you do, my friend.
Oh yeah.
Right? I don't
Yeah.
right, I've never thought of being raised speaking English, but never speaking it until finally, yeah, this really cool car shows up and you're like, "Holy shit, that's cool."
Yeah. That's
Never
ridiculous, but
that's
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 amazing.
true. Yeah.
That's so you,
Yeah.
right? That never would have been that never would be me,
Yeah.
right? I never would have seen the ability to interpret a letter as an opportunity to change your life like you,
Yeah.
right? I don't have the same love of cars as you. That doesn't mean I don't appreciate a good car. I think we all do, but where we do have in common is pre 1990, they're great. post 1990, right. But what it comes down to is there is only one you, my friend, and you see the world the way you see the world,
Yes.
and that's cool. And when you tell a story, you share that, and that's why it never comes out exactly like you imagine it to be.
Yeah. Yes.
But I would argue that's part of the magic too,
I,
right?
I, I think
Because
I think yeah, that to some extent you're reflecting your soul. I would say to some extent in your books or your writings, whatever it is. That,
yeah,
that is very true. Yeah.
yeah, and you're a passionate guy, and you care about the things you care about. So
Yes.
naturally, they're going to come up in your novels because you're the one writing them. And
Yeah.
sometimes I bet you, and this is the other thing too, when you look back at your stuff, right? You look at it, it's like, holy crap, I really did care about this, right? Right,
Yeah.
and that's a great thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's
It's where
true.
you, it's where you were,
Yeah.
right? And where you are led you to where you are now,
Now, and that
and that's a wonder.
changes. That
Yeah,
changes.
and that's a wonderful thing, is it not?
Yes.
Right?
Yes, it is. It
And
is.
you're hopefully a better writer now than you were when you wrote your first book, because you've now done a few of these now and you have a little idea what you're doing,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. That's
yeah,
true. That's
yeah.
true.
So you wrote your novel, your first novel. This is the question I'm
Uh,
going to ask, and I'm going to ask, and we'll talk about your current stuff. When you
yeah.
finished your novel the first time, what did you learn?
Well, the number one, since I had read it for myself, really, you know, I didn't even think of having it published or anything. And it was funny because a very dear friend of mine who passed away some years ago was visiting from Mexico. He was an attorney and a public accountant in Mexico, and we went to school together in Mexico. And he came to visit, and I told him we were sitting at the Intercontinental Airport here in Houston, waiting for his flight, and I told him the story of the book. Uh, in a few words, you know? Just well, this is the story, this is the thing. And he said, "Hey, why do you send me the manuscript?" I said, "Okay, I'm going to send it to you." And I sent the manuscript to him, and he had it published in Mexico. Actually, he had it printed more than anything else. No? They had just started with the some machines that apparently you can. It's the same cost to produce one copy to produce 10,000. No? So he ordered 50 copies. So that, and he sent them to me, and I just couldn't believe it. No, I was so happy.
Yeah, that's
And
cool,
of course,
right?
now my daughter has a publishing company, and she's published now my novels. Inklings Publishing is her company. But the point is that even the uh, the copy is different and everything. We have changed a lot of the content of the book because there were mistakes, a lot of typos and things, and things that have been corrected. But it was really something very satisfying when I saw it published, when I saw it in a book form. And that is what maybe pushed me to want to keep on writing. And I wrote second novel, and I'm working on the third one right now.
Yeah. Okay. So you kind of, a whim became a way of life for you. Yeah, that's really cool. That's
Yeah.
really, really cool. So your third book's coming out now, or is it out now?
No, no, I'm still working on it. It's also funny because I had thought of calling it the sequel, huh? But it happened to be actually the prequel because when I started writing it, it was kind of funny. My daughter asked me to write a small ghost story for Christmas, and I remembered something that happened. Actually, did happen to my grandfather. He was in the Mexican Revolution, and he was a major in the Mexican Federal Army that lost the revolution, by the way. But he was at some point battle in Mexico. In a part of Mexico, it's called Orendain. And I remember my father telling in the table at some point, I was one of the first casualties in the Battle of Orendain. And my father was, when the Battle of Orendain, my father must have been 4, 5, 6 years old. But then he explained, yeah, I was 6 years old and I was riding with my mother in the military train that was attacked by the revolutionaries, and I was wounded. Many people were wounded. But the interesting part was that my grandfather told me a story that actually happened. It was even published in the newspapers in Mexico, that when they lost the battle, he was the head of the 14th Regiment of the Federal Army, and they were trying to reach Guadalajara, which is at that time was the second or third city of Mexico, and they were lost in the jungle, in the forest, and they were trying to get to the city, and they couldn't find. They didn't have a compass, and they were lost. And at some point, they saw soldiers coming, and someone yelled, "Halt! Who goes?" And my grandfather said, well, he was panicked because he didn't know who they were, no, and he just answered 14th Regiment, and then the other side started, hurrah, hurrah, 14th Regiment. And then my grandfather, when he reached Guadalajara, discovered that the 14th Regiment was the 14th Regiment was the Constitutionalist Army, which was the enemy. But the funny part was that after that incident, that they said 14th Regiment, at some point they crested a little hill, and at the hill they saw the towers of the Cathedral of Guadalajara, which are very typical, strange conical type, you know. And they saw them light, and they saw the lights, and they started, oh, that's great, there's Guadalajara. So, and they were going in a totally different direction. So they turned and they went to Guadalajara, and after a few minutes of seeing the lights, the light disappeared. Huh? But they got to Guadalajara, and when they got to Guadalajara, of course, they were received by the commander of the garrison there, and very happy to see a few of you who survived the battle. And then my grandfather remembers telling the general, General, what saved us was the fact that you lit the towers of the cathedral, because otherwise lost, no? I said, what do you mean that we put lights? There were no lights. The city was without power since 4 years ago, because the bombardment of the Constitutional Army destroyed the generators. Had no light at all. We haven't had lights at all for several days. And say, my grandfather said, well, I don't know what happened, General, but we saw the lights of the tower. And it was even considered to some point important enough to be published in a newspaper in Mexico. And because of that, I wrote that story, and that gave me the idea, well, I'm going to tell a little bit about my grandfather and my father, and then about myself a little bit. So instead of being the sequel, it's going to end being the prequel.
Nice.
Before Payback. So that's the idea.
That's really cool. Oh man. Wow, dude. So, all right. I don't know how to follow that up exactly, because that is such a really cool story. Other than to say that maybe, just maybe, you're not the only. It sounds like your whole family's been blessed, not just you, right?
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
it was something.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that was big. Like, that's a really
Yeah,
cool story.
it was funny. It was funny.
Yeah. So you got a prequel. So now you're actually doing a proper sequel.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess the question I have is, how long has the prequel been out?
Excuse me?
How long has your prequel been out? The second book. How long has your second book been out?
Well, the second book is called The Assassin, and it's about Roberto Duran. Is a Vietnam veteran, and he travels to. He lives in Houston, of course, and he travels to Tijuana for a case of different type of case, and he runs into a man who was his fellow soldier in Vietnam, and he's working as a notary public in Mexico. And the story is that the Mexican notary public is in reality a triggerman, an assassin, a paid assassin. And then he runs, Roberto Duran, my character, runs into him in Paris for a case that they had in Paris. And he runs into him in Paris. And at the same time, is assassinated in Paris. And well, in time, he discovers that his great friend, is a triggerman. No? And he confronts him and tries to bring him to the good side of life, and that's the story. That's the story.
That's the story. Yeah, I just put the link up for people that are going to watch this where they can find it. So Roberto Duran's your series.
Yes,
so,
it's a series. Yeah, the third one is the prequel of Payback.
Oh, the third one's going to be your prequel. Okay. Okay, I misunderstood. I thought like the third one's gonna be the sequel, not the prequel.
No.
But okay, that's cool.
The third one's gonna be. It started supposed to be a sequel after
the sequel that became a prequel.
When I started writing it, it took a life of its own, and now it's a prequel.
So when do you have an idea when your prequel's coming out? Do you have an idea?
Well, I think I'm about 2/3 finished book.
Later this year.
Since I only write when I'm inspired enough to do it, I hope to finish it sometime by June or July of this year. Maybe publish.
Okay. So here's the deal.
Yeah.
I have thoroughly enjoyed talking to you this last hour. You're a very, very interesting guy, right? And like you've done a lot of interesting things. Next time you come back. You come back. Would you like to come back on the show again?
Oh yes, absolutely. I would love to. It would be a great honor for me to be invited back. Thank you for having me, by the way.
Yeah, no, dude, this was a lot of fun. I sometimes you meet people that pleasantly surprise you. You have been a pleasant surprise. So, but before a little ego thing. So, was everything you heard about me true?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
But I was, to be honest with you, I was very nervous about doing it because I'm very bad at speaking. But once you get me going,
You're not.
I will stop. No, it has been a very enjoyable experience to be with you, Josh. Really, it's an honor to have for me to have been invited by you to this.
Yeah, no, I am more than happy to have you. So I'll make you a little deal. When your next book is ready, talk to your publicist. We'll make another time. You come back because, and this is why I'm ending it here because this is my feeling. The stories about your family in the Army, the stories about like that part of your family's history. That deserves its own podcast and probably should better tie into when your next book is out. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We should come back and you'll tell stories about your grandfather. Like, guys, that is such a really cool story because that again, the biggest interpretation there are three things I got talking to you.
Yeah.
You're a romantic. You are a romantic.
Oh yes, I have to confess I am. Yes.
Yeah, right. The second thing, you're very proud of your history. You're proud of what you've accomplished. You're proud of your family, both your ancestors and your children very much. It sounds to me like you're very and well earned. And the third thing, and this is where we will close. I think the interview is you care very much about authenticity. And I think and like I said, lawyers, good or bad, get a bad rap because you deal with deception a lot. You just do. You do. And I think the most honest. My uncle's a lawyer, and he's been a defense lawyer. And one of the things one of the hardest things about that is again what you're saying, right? Is a lot of people who are accused of a crime are guilty. It's not always the case, But there's
No.
but usually people are accused for a reason, right? So you have to deal with the fact that people don't like confronting their shit.
Yes.
Like that's a big part of your job,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Right now, a defense lawyer has a really hard job because you're having to defend this person to the best of your ability. So what my uncle did was he wouldn't ask because one sense it doesn't really matter, but in another sense it just you don't want to lie to yourself as much as possible. And it's a lot harder to defend a guilty man if you know they're guilty. It's a subconscious thing, right? So that's what he did. But that also does mean though that sometimes, I mean, your job does have a lot of deception, not just on who you're dealing with, but even with yourselves. So and again, that's I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that is generally just the way it is.
Yes.
So
That's what it is. That's right.
yeah, right. So I'm impressed you've been able to, in spite of everything you've seen, right? You're still a romantic. You're not a cynical. You're right. No, I that's a compliment. That is, so many people let what you see diminish or make things go down a very negative light because that's what
That's
you
true.
see.
That's very true.
Right?
Yeah, that's very
You
true.
have not. You have not. And that is a very impressive thing, honestly.
I'm an idealist. This really, I would want for everybody to be perfect, but it's impossible.
Well, yeah. Well, see, I'm an idealist too. I've seen my own. Again, you've listened to me. I'm not saying I've seen what you've seen, but I think we'll both agree that we both have seen our fair share of deception in the world.
Yeah.
Where you're, again, an idealist isn't necessarily blind. It's
No,
just
no,
that
no.
no, quite the opposite. A real idealist,
The opposite, exactly. Yes.
yeah.
You wish the best. You're realist that okay, that's the way it is. No?
Yeah. Well, sometimes I just look at this like, again, you're a romantic. The other thing is you hope for the best for. This is just maybe I'm wrong on this, but I think I'm right. You hope for the best for everybody, even if they don't fulfill whatever your ideal is. That doesn't really matter. What matters is that you wish them well, even the people like you, right? You wish them well. You hope for the best, and if they don't get it, it doesn't touch you. I'm not saying there aren't some days, but it doesn't touch you. And that maybe that is by the grace of God. Who knows, right? But kudos to you. Like, honestly, kudos to you.
Well, let me tell you, you're I don't know if you're studying psychology, but you know a lot of psychology because you have analyzed me greatly.
Well, I interview people all the time, right?
The way I feel to be, yes.
Yeah, no, it's just again, it's something I picked up. I picked this up really early because, again, the way you approached when you talked about your story, you're a man that cares very much about the truth. I got that immediately, and then, but again, people that care about the truth, they're romantics. They're not cynics. Cynicism is for people that want to protect themselves from harm. And you can understand that to a point, right? But that's what a cynic is, someone that cares so much that doesn't want to get hurt anymore. An idealist cares like the cynic, but I'm not saying they want to get hurt, but they know that life is a risk and that you have to let the guard down.
It's gonna happen.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. So
that's true.
Yeah, it's just I've interviewed a lot of people, and I do read people fairly well. I think like I said, I would have been a good psychologist if I'd read
You analyze it.
But my friend, I think what we should do, this is what I will say. First off, thank you very much for coming on my show tonight. It was great to meet you. But let's do this properly. So your latest book is Assassin. So for people watching, for people listening, let's make this the last thing we talk about tonight. What's it about? Like, what is Assassin about? What is Assassin about?
Well, the assassin is again, it's an individual who was a soldier in Vietnam, and soldiers sometimes like what they're doing. Sometimes they don't. Most times they don't, but sometimes they do. And this particular individual liked it very, very much. The part about killing other people. So he actually becomes a triggerman. And in Mexico, with the cartels and all that stuff, it's very easy to get someone who is very efficient at killing and making a fortune. So this guy becomes a triggerman, but he was a fellow soldier with Roberto Duran in Vietnam. So they meet again, and he parades, or well, actually not parades. He is in Auto Republic. And by the way, let me tell you that in Auto Republics, at least in Texas, anybody can be an Auto Republic. But in Mexico, it's a civil system, and in Mexico, to become an Auto Republic, you have to be an attorney. And that's la creme de la creme of the attorneys. I mean, it's the top echelon of an attorney. And they are all wealthy. You know? They make a lot of money because if you want to make a last will, you have to go to another republic. If you want to sell a property, to buy a property, you have to go to another republic. So this guy is very wealthy, but he enjoys his work as a triggerman. And Roberto's trying to get him out of that life, and I'm not going to tell you the story because
No, absolutely not.
Nobody's going to buy the book. But in the end, Roberto prevails, and the other guy gets saved. Let's call it.
Okay. All right. Well, for those people watching, those people listening, this is the link at the description below, and that people can pick it up. And how can people find you if they want to meet you, talk to you? Do you have a webpage or anywhere you want people to go?
No, unfortunately. Not yet. I am planning on having one. My daughter already chastised me because I don't have one. But I will have one soon, and I will let you know, and I will try to publish to everybody what I have.
All right, my friend. I'll tell you what. Next time you come back on the show, right? We'll have your website. Yeah, you'll have a website ready so people can find you. Is that a deal?
Yeah, that's a deal.
Yeah. All right. On that phone, ladies and gentlemen, let me show you my latest book, which is, again, Trained Professional, folks. I'm just taking a second here to put this out there. This, here we go. This is my latest book called Alice in Wonderland mashed up with Greek mythology, right? Alice chases the Queen of Hearts over the edge of the world and ends up in the Greek underworld, where to escape, she must play croquet against Jason of the Argonauts. And in this underworld maze, Alice and company encounter gods, monsters, and maybe most importantly, themselves. It's available now. I want to thank Ramon for coming on the show. Ramon, you're very sweet. I really enjoyed having you on the show.
Thank you, Josh. I thank you for having me, and hopefully we'll do it again.
Oh, totally. And to everybody watching, everybody listening, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Stay inspired. Keep shining in the dark. And tomorrow, I have Nicholas LaRue as my guest tomorrow. Same time as now. Thanks, guys. Have yourselves a wonderful night, and I'll see you tomorrow.
See you. Bye-bye.